Rosa woke up every morning at 3:30. While the rest of the city was still deep in sleep, she was already putting on her old blue dress and tying her hair back with a rubber band. The alarm clock wasn't needed anymore. After 12 years of the same routine, her body just knew when it was time to get up. She would quietly make herself a cup of coffee in the small kitchen of her apartment. The walls were thin and she didn't want to wake her daughter, who was sleeping in the next room. The coffee was always the same, black, no sugar. She couldn't afford the fancy creams and sweeteners that other people used. By 4 in the morning, Rosa was walking through the empty streets toward the fish market. Her footsteps echoed on the quiet sidewalks. The street lights cast long shadows and the air was cool and fresh. This was her favorite time of day, when the world belonged to her and the few other early workers who kept the city running. 2. Fish market was a different world. Trucks would arrive from the coast, bringing boxes and boxes of fresh fish packed in ice. The smell of the ocean filled the air. Rosa knew this smell better than anyone. She could tell which fish were the freshest, just by breathing in. Her hands moved quickly, sorting through the catches, picking the best ones for her small stall. Setting up took an hour. She arranged the fish on beds of crushed ice, making sure each one looked perfect. The silver scales caught the early morning light. She wrote the prices on small cards with neat handwriting. Everything had to be just right. In this business, appearance was everything. By 6 o'clock, the market was alive with activity. Other vendors were setting up their stalls. There was Miguel, who sold vegetables, old Carlos with his flower stand, and Ana, who made fresh bread. They were like a family. They looked out for each other, shared coffee when times were tough, and celebrated together when business was good. But Rosa's world changed completely when the morning rush began. Around 7:30, the business people started walking through the market. They wore expensive suits and carried leather briefcases. Their shoes clicked on the concrete floors as they hurried to catch buses and trains to their office jobs. These were the people who made Rosa feel invisible. She watched them buy their morning coffee from the fancy stand near the entrance. They would laugh and talk on their phones, making important deals and planning important meetings. Rosa tried not to look at them too long. She focused on her fish instead, but they noticed her. "Oh God, do you smell that?" she heard a young woman say to her friend as they walked past Rosa's stall. The woman was wearing a perfect white blouse and carrying a designer handbag. She covered her nose with her hand. "It's that fish lady," her friend replied, wrinkling her face. "I don't know how she can stand working with that smell all day." They didn't whisper. They said it loud enough for Rosa to hear. Maybe they didn't care, or maybe they wanted her to hear. Rosa kept arranging her fish, pretending she hadn't heard anything. This happened every day. Different people, same words. "There's the fish woman again. You can smell her coming from a mile away. How can anyone work with fish? It's so gross." Some people would actually change their path when they saw Rosa's stall. They would walk around the long way just to avoid getting too close, as if being near her would somehow make them smell like fish too. The worst part was when they brought their children. Rosa would see little kids pointing at her while their parents pulled them away quickly. "Don't touch anything," she heard one mother tell her son. "Fish is dirty." Rosa's hands never stopped moving, but inside each comment was like a small cut. After 12 years, she had hundreds of these small cuts. They made her shoulders slump a little more each day. They made her voice quieter when customers asked about prices. The regular customers were different. Mrs. Peterson came every Tuesday to buy fish for her cat. She always asked Rosa which fish was the best and actually listened to the answer. There was the young father who bought fish every Friday to make dinner for his family. He would tell Rosa about his week while she wrapped his order in newspaper. These customers saw Rosa as a person. They looked her in the eyes when they talked. They said thank you and meant it. But they were not the ones who hurt her feelings. It was the others. The ones who acted like she was less than human because she worked with fish. Rosa tried to understand them. Maybe they had never worked with their hands. Maybe they had never needed to take any job they could find to pay the rent. Maybe they had never sacrificed their dreams to take care of their family. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. Sometimes, when business was slow, Rosa would watch the people walking by. She would see the office workers checking their phones. Always busy, always important. She wondered what their lives were like. Did they go home to nice apartments? Did their children get to take piano lessons and play sports? She thought about her own daughter, sleeping peacefully while Rosa worked. The girl was smart and curious. She asked questions about everything. She drew pictures of fish with wings and told stories about underwater cities. Rosa wanted her daughter to have choices that Rosa never had. But every day, as the morning rush ended and the comments faded away, Rosa was left with her fish and her thoughts. Her hands smelled like the ocean no matter how much she washed them. Her dress absorbed the scent until it became part of who she was. The young professionals didn't know that Rosa went home every night and scrubbed her hands until they were red. They didn't know that she kept a bottle of hand lotion by her bed because the constant washing made her skin crack. They didn't know that she sometimes stood in the shower for 20 minutes trying to wash away not just the smell, but also the feeling of being invisible. They saw her as the fish lady. Nothing more, nothing less. But Rosa was so much more than that. Inside her chest was a heart that had once dreamed of beautiful things. In her mind were memories of music and laughter and possibilities. In her soul was a strength that got her up every morning at 3:30, no matter how hard the day before had been. The people who mocked her didn't know any of this. They couldn't see past the smell of fish to the person underneath, and Rosa had learned not to show them. She had learned to make herself small, to speak quietly, to take up as little space as possible. She had learned to hide the parts of herself that were beautiful and special. She had almost forgotten those parts existed. Almost. 22 years ago, Rosa's life was completely different. She lived in a small house with her parents and younger brother. The house wasn't fancy, but it was filled with music. In the corner of the living room sat an old upright piano that her grandfather had bought from a pawn shop many years before. Rosa discovered the piano when she was 6 years old. She climbed onto the bench one afternoon while her mother was cooking dinner. Her tiny fingers pressed down on the keys, and beautiful sounds came out. It was like magic. From that moment, Rosa was obsessed with making music. Her mother, Carmen, worked as a seamstress in a factory downtown. Every day she sat at a sewing machine for 10 hours, making clothes that other people would wear to fancy parties. Her fingers were always sore from the needlework, and her back ached from bending over the machine. But when she heard Rosa playing piano, all the pain went away. "Play that song again, mija," Carmen would say, sitting down in her old chair after work. Rosa would play whatever melody was in her heart, and her mother would close her eyes and smile. It was the best part of both their days. Rosa's father, Diego, worked construction. He built houses and office buildings around the city. His hands were rough and calloused from years of hard work. When winter came and construction slowed down, money got tight. But Diego always found a way to keep food on the table and pay the rent. Diego didn't know much about music, but he knew talent when he saw it. He watched Rosa's small fingers move across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible for someone so young. She never had to think about where to put her hands. The music just flowed out of her like water from a spring. "This girl is special," he told Carmen one evening after Rosa had gone to bed. "She's going to do something important with her life." When Rosa turned 8, her parents made a decision that would change everything. They would find a way to pay for proper piano lessons. Carmen started working extra hours at the factory. Diego took weekend jobs painting houses and fixing roofs. They ate beans and rice for dinner more often than they wanted to. They bought their clothes from thrift stores and never went to movies or restaurants. But every Tuesday afternoon, Rosa walked to Mrs. Valencia's house for her piano lesson. Mrs. Valencia was a retired music teacher who had once played in the city orchestra. Her house was small but filled with the most beautiful music Rosa had ever heard. Mrs. Valencia had recordings of famous pianists from all over the world. She would play them for Rosa and explain what made each performance special. "Listen to how he touches the keys," Mrs. Valencia would say, playing a recording of a famous concert pianist. "Music isn't just about hitting the right notes. It's about telling a story with your heart. Rosa learned fast. Faster than any student Mrs. Valencia had ever taught. Within 6 months, Rosa was playing pieces that usually took students 2 years to master. Her fingers seemed to know exactly where to go even when learning a new song. By the time Rosa was 10, she was performing in local recitals. She would wear her one good dress, the blue one with tiny flowers that her mother had sewn by hand. She would sit at the piano in front of audiences of proud parents and music lovers, and she would transport them to another world. The applause was like sunshine. Rosa felt alive on stage in a way she never felt anywhere else. When she played, she wasn't just a girl from a poor family. She was an artist. She was someone special. Word spread about the young girl with the incredible talent. When Rosa was 12, a talent scout from the Regional Music Academy came to hear her play. The academy was a prestigious school where only the most gifted students were accepted. Students who graduated from the academy often went on to perform in major orchestras or become concert pianists. "We would like to offer Rosa a scholarship," the talent scout told her parents after hearing her play. "She has extraordinary potential. With proper training, she could have a professional career in music." Carmen and Diego looked at each other with tears in their eyes. This was the opportunity they had dreamed of for their daughter. Rosa would get the best music education in the region, completely free. She would study with master teachers and perform with other talented young musicians. Rosa threw herself into her studies at the academy. She practiced for hours every day. Her technique became flawless. She could play the most difficult pieces by composers like Chopin and Rachmaninoff. Her teachers said she had the touch of a natural-born musician. At 15, Rosa won her first major competition. She performed Chopin's Piano Concerto No. 1 with the Regional Youth Orchestra. The audience gave her a standing ovation that lasted for 5 minutes. Music critics wrote reviews saying she was a rising star who would surely have an international career. Rosa started dreaming about her future. She imagined herself performing in the great concert halls of the world. She pictured herself wearing elegant gowns and taking bows in front of thousands of people. She dreamed of recording albums and inspiring other young musicians, the way her heroes had inspired her. Her parents were so proud. Carmen would tell everyone at the factory about her daughter, the pianist. Diego would carry newspaper clippings of Rosa's performances in his wallet and show them to anyone who would look. They had sacrificed so much, and it was all paying off. Rosa's younger brother Antonio was proud of his sister too, but sometimes he felt forgotten. All the family's money and attention went to Rosa's music career. Antonio was smart and had dreams of becoming a doctor, but there was no money left for his education. He never complained, though. He loved Rosa and wanted her to succeed. But life has a way of changing everything in an instant. When Rosa was 17, just 1 year away from graduating from the academy, disaster struck. Diego was working on a construction site when he fell from scaffolding. He hit his head and suffered a serious brain injury. The doctors said he might never work again. Without Diego's income, the family couldn't pay their bills. Carmen tried to work even more hours, but it wasn't enough. The medical bills from Diego's accident piled up on the kitchen table. Rosa watched her parents worry and cry late at night when they thought she couldn't hear. Then Carmen got sick. Years of working, long hours and breathing chemical fumes at the factory had damaged her lungs. She started coughing constantly and had trouble breathing. The doctor said she needed to stop working immediately, but how could she? Her family needed the money more than ever. Rosa felt her dreams slipping away like sand through her fingers. She was supposed to graduate from the academy in 6 months. After that, she had been accepted to study at the National Conservatory with one of the country's most famous piano teachers. But dreams don't pay for medicine or rent or food. One night, Rosa sat at the old family piano and played until her tears made it impossible to see the keys. She knew what she had to do. She had always known this day might come. The next morning, she told her parents she was leaving the academy to help support the family. "No, mija," Carmen whispered, even though she could barely speak. "Music is your gift, you can't give it up." But Rosa had already made her decision. Her family needed her more than the world needed another pianist. She never touched a piano again. It was a Tuesday morning in late September when everything started to change. Rosa was arranging her fish display when she heard music drifting through the market. Someone had set up speakers near the main entrance and was playing classical piano pieces while people walked by. The music hit Rosa like a wave. Her hands froze over the ice holding a piece of red snapper that suddenly felt too heavy. The melody was Debussy's Clair de Lune, one of the pieces she used to play perfectly. She hadn't heard it in years. Without thinking, Rosa's fingers started moving in the air, following the invisible keys. Her muscle memory was still there, buried but not gone. For just a moment, she was 17 again, sitting at the Academy's grand piano, lost in the music. "Mama, what are you doing?" Rosa turned to see her 8-year-old daughter Isabella standing beside the stall with her school backpack. Rosa quickly put her hands down, embarrassed that someone had caught her playing invisible piano. "Nothing, mija. Just listening to the music." Isabella tilted her head, curious. She was a smart girl with big brown eyes that seemed to see everything. "Were you pretending to play piano?" "Maybe a little," Rosa admitted with a small smile. "I didn't know you knew how to play piano." Rosa's heart ached. She had never told Isabella about her musical past. It felt too painful to talk about, like poking at an old wound that had never properly healed. But seeing the wonder in her daughter's eyes made her want to share something, anything, about who she used to be. "I learned a long time ago," Rosa said quietly. "Before you were born." "Can you teach me?" Isabella asked, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "We don't have a piano, sweetheart." "But if we did, would you teach me?" Rosa looked at her daughter's hopeful face and felt something crack open inside her chest. "Yes," she whispered. "If we had a piano, I would teach you everything I know." That afternoon, after Rosa closed her stall, she and Isabella walked home together. Isabella was unusually quiet, which meant she was thinking hard about something. Rosa knew her daughter well enough to wait for whatever was coming. "Mama," Isabella finally said as they climbed the stairs to their apartment, "why don't you play piano anymore?" Rosa stopped walking. She had hoped Isabella would forget about their morning conversation, but her daughter was like a dog with a bone when something interested her. "It's complicated, mija. Did you stop because Daddy left?" Rosa's ex-husband had left when Isabella was 3 years old. He couldn't handle the responsibility of a family and had moved to another city without looking back. Rosa rarely talked about him, but Isabella was old enough now to ask questions. "No, sweetheart. I stopped playing long before I met your father." They reached their apartment, and Rosa started making dinner while Isabella did her homework at the small kitchen table. But Rosa could feel her daughter watching her, waiting for more answers. That evening, after Isabella was in bed, Rosa sat alone in the living room. The space where a piano might have fit was occupied by an old couch and a TV that barely worked. Rosa closed her eyes and tried to remember what it felt like to make music. Her hands moved to her lap, and she found herself silently playing a Mozart sonata on her thighs. The music was still there in her fingers, in her heart, waiting to come out. The next few weeks passed normally, but Rosa noticed that Isabella was paying more attention to music everywhere they went. When they walked past street musicians, Isabella would stop and listen. When music played in stores, Isabella would ask what instrument was making which sound. Then came the announcement that changed everything. Rosa was cleaning her stall after a busy Saturday when she saw a young woman putting up colorful posters around the market. The woman looked like a college student, with paint stains on her clothes and enthusiasm radiating from her smile. "Excuse me," the woman called out to Rosa. "Would it be okay if I put one of these posters near your stall?" Rosa looked at the poster in the woman's hands. It was bright yellow with musical notes dancing around the edges. In bold letters, it said, "Community Voices Talent Show. All talents welcome. Open auditions this Thursday." "What kind of talent show?" Rosa asked, curious despite herself. It's for anyone in the community who has a special skill they want to share, the young woman explained. Singers, dancers, musicians, storytellers, even people who do magic tricks. We want to celebrate all the hidden talents in our neighborhood. That sounds nice, Rosa said politely, but she was already turning back to her cleaning. You should come audition, the woman said brightly. I bet you have some amazing talent we don't know about. Rosa almost laughed. If only this cheerful stranger knew that the fish lady used to play concert halls. I don't think so, but thank you. The woman shrugged and moved on to the next stall, but she left the poster taped to a pole near Rosa's display. For the rest of the day, Rosa found herself glancing at that poster. Other vendors were talking about it excitedly. Miguel, the vegetable seller, said he might sing a traditional song from his homeland. Anna from the bread stand mentioned that she used to dance flamenco. But Rosa stayed quiet. The idea of performing again felt impossible. She couldn't even remember the last time she had touched a real piano. That evening, Isabella spotted the poster immediately when they got home. Mama, look, she said, pulling the folded paper from Rosa's purse. A talent show. We should go watch it. Maybe, Rosa said. But she wasn't really listening. She was making dinner and thinking about the bills she needed to pay. Wait, Isabella said, studying the poster more carefully. It says anyone can audition. Mama, you should play piano. Rosa's wooden spoon clattered against the pot. Isabella, that's not... I can't do that. Why not? You said you know how to play. It's been too long. I don't even remember the songs anymore. This was a lie, and Rosa knew it. She remembered every piece she had ever learned. They were stored in her mind like treasures in a locked box waiting for someone to find the key. But you could practice, Isabella insisted. There's a piano at my school. Mrs. Rodriguez lets kids use it after class sometimes. Rosa felt panic rising in her chest. The thought of sitting at a piano again, of possibly failing or embarrassing herself, was terrifying. What if her fingers didn't work the way they used to? What if she had lost her gift completely? Isabella, please stop talking about this. But Isabella was like her mother in many ways. Once she got an idea in her head, she didn't give up easily. Over the next few days, Isabella brought up the talent show constantly. She would hum melodies and ask Rosa what they were called. She would point out pianos in store windows and ask Rosa to explain how they worked. She even drew a picture of Rosa sitting at a grand piano wearing a beautiful dress and smiling. Why? Are you so interested in this? Rosa finally asked her daughter. Isabella was quiet for a moment, coloring carefully inside the lines of her drawing. Because I want people to know that my mama is special. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Mija, I am just a fish seller. No, you're not, Isabella said firmly. You're my mama, and you're the smartest, strongest person I know, and you have magic in your fingers. I can tell. How can you tell? Sometimes when you think I'm not looking, I see you moving your hands like you're playing invisible music. And when you hum while you work, it's the most beautiful sound in the world. Rosa realized that her daughter had been watching her more carefully than she knew. All those moments when Rosa thought she was hiding her musical soul, Isabella had been seeing right through her. That night after Isabella was asleep, Rosa sat on her bed and looked at her hands. They were rough now, with small cuts from fish bones and stains that never quite washed out. But underneath the damage, they were still the same hands that had once made magic. For the first time in 20 years, Rosa allowed herself to remember what it felt like to be truly alive. Thursday morning came faster than Rosa wanted. She had spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about the talent show auditions. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see herself sitting at a piano. But she couldn't decide if it was a beautiful dream or a terrible nightmare. Isabella had been unusually quiet during breakfast, but Rosa could see the hope burning in her daughter's eyes. The girl kept glancing at the clock on the kitchen wall, counting down the hours until the auditions began at 6 o'clock. Mama, Isabella finally said as Rosa was getting ready for work, are you going to try out today? Rosa's stomach twisted into knots. I don't think so, Mija. But why not? How could Rosa explain to an 8-year-old that some dreams were too dangerous to chase again? How could she tell her daughter that she was afraid of remembering who she used to be? It's complicated, Rosa said, the same answer she always gave when she didn't know what else to say. But as Rosa walked to work that morning, she couldn't stop thinking about Isabella's face. Her daughter believed in her so completely, so absolutely. When was the last time anyone had looked at Rosa like she was capable of something wonderful? The day dragged by slowly. Rosa sold fish and made change and smiled at customers, but her mind was somewhere else entirely. Every few minutes, she would catch herself looking toward the Civic Center 2 blocks away, where the auditions were happening. Around 3 o'clock, the strangest thing happened. A group of teenagers walked by Rosa's stall, laughing loudly about something on one of their phones. Rosa recognized them from the market. They were the ones who always made jokes about her smell and called her the fish lady behind her back. "Did you guys see that video of the janitor who could sing opera?" one of them was saying. "It's crazy how you never know what people are hiding." "I know, right? Like, imagine if someone totally random turned out to be this amazing musician or something," another one added. They walked past Rosa without looking at her, still talking about hidden talents and surprising people. Rosa felt something shift inside her chest. Maybe they were right. Maybe people really didn't know what others were capable of. At 4:30, Rosa started closing her stall early. She told herself she was just tired and wanted to go home. But deep down she knew she was lying. She was going to walk past the Civic Center just to see what was happening. Just out of curiosity. The Civic Center was buzzing with activity. Rosa could see people going in and out of the main entrance carrying instruments and costumes. A banner hung over the doorway that said, "Community Voices, discover the talent around you." Rosa stood across the street watching from a safe distance. She saw Miguel from the market walking in with his guitar. Mrs. Chen from the flower shop was carrying a bag that probably held a traditional costume. Even teenage kids from the neighborhood were going inside with their friends and families cheering them on. "Are you going to audition?" Rosa turned around to find the cheerful young woman who had put up the posters around the market. She was holding a clipboard and wearing a name tag that said Volunteer Coordinator. "Oh no," Rosa said quickly. "I was just watching. You're the fish vendor from the market, right? I remember you from when I put up the posters." Rosa nodded, feeling suddenly self-conscious about the faint smell of fish that always followed her around. "We could really use more participants," the young woman continued. "The whole point of this show is to celebrate the hidden talents in our community. I bet you have some amazing skill that would surprise everyone." Rosa almost told her the truth right then. She almost said, "I used to be a pianist." But the words stuck in her throat like fish bones. "I should go home," Rosa said instead. "My daughter is waiting for me." But as Rosa walked away, she realized she wasn't going home. Her feet were carrying her toward Isabella's school. Without really planning it, she found herself standing outside the music room, looking through the small window in the door. There it was, the piano Isabella had told her about. It was just an old upright piano, nothing fancy, but Rosa's heart started beating faster just looking at it. The building was empty, except for a few teachers having a meeting down the hall. Rosa tried the door handle. It was unlocked. She stepped inside the music room and closed the door behind her. The late afternoon sunlight was streaming through the windows, making dust particles dance in the air. The room smelled like chalk and children's excitement. Rosa walked slowly toward the piano. Her hands were shaking as she lifted the lid that covered the keys. The black and white keys looked exactly the same as they had 20 years ago, waiting for someone to bring them to life. She sat down on the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment she just sat there, feeling the smooth surfaces under her fingertips. Then, very gently, she pressed down on middle C. The sound was pure and clear and perfect. It was like hearing a voice she had thought was lost forever. Rosa played a simple scale just to see if her fingers remembered how to move. They did. Slowly at first, then with growing confidence, she played a melody she had learned as a child. Her mother's favorite song. The music filled the empty room and seemed to fill the empty spaces in Rosa's heart too. Her hands moved across the keys with a grace that surprised her. The years of not playing melted away like ice in summer. She played, for 20 minutes, moving from simple melodies to more complex pieces. Chopin, Mozart, Debussy. Each song came back to her like an old friend returning from a long journey. When she finally stopped playing, Rosa was crying. Not sad tears, but tears of recognition. She was still there, the girl who had dreamed of concert halls and beautiful music. She had been hiding inside the fish vendor all along, waiting to be remembered. Rosa looked at her watch. It was 5:45. The auditions at the Civic Center would be starting in 15 minutes. She could go home and pretend this moment had never happened. She could go back to being invisible, selling fish and accepting the cruel comments from strangers. She could protect herself from the possibility of failure or disappointment, or she could do something terrifying and wonderful. She could walk into that Civic Center and show everyone who she really was. Rosa thought about Isabella, who believed her mother was special. She thought about her parents who had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at music. She thought about all the people who had called her names and treated her like she was nothing. She stood up from the piano bench and walked toward the door. Her legs felt shaky, like she was walking toward the edge of a cliff. But she kept walking. Outside the school, Rosa almost turned toward home 3 different times. Her practical mind was screaming at her to stop being foolish. What if she embarrassed herself? What if she had lost her talent completely? What if people laughed at her? But then she remembered how it felt to play music again. For those 20 minutes in the music room, she had been completely alive. She had been herself. Rosa reached the Civic Center at exactly 6 o'clock. There was a small crowd of people waiting to audition, and families sitting in the lobby to support their loved ones. Everyone looked excited and nervous. Rosa joined the line of people signing up to audition. When it was her turn, the volunteer coordinator from earlier smiled with genuine surprise. "I'm so glad you decided to try out. What's your talent?" Rosa's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Piano." The coordinator wrote Rosa's name on the audition list and handed her a number. "You'll be called in about an hour. The piano is already set up on stage." Rosa found a seat in the lobby and waited. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Part of her wanted to run away, but a bigger part of her was ready to stop hiding. After 20 years of silence, Rosa was finally ready to make music again. Rosa's number was 43. She watched as performer after performer was called to the stage. A teenage boy played guitar and sang a song he had written himself. Twin sisters did a dance routine that made everyone clap along. An elderly man told jokes that had the whole audience laughing. Each performance was beautiful in its own way. Rosa could hear the applause through the closed doors of the auditorium, and she felt her nerves growing stronger with every passing minute. At 7:30, Isabella arrived with Mrs. Rodriguez, her teacher from school. Rosa had called the school earlier to let them know where she was, and Mrs. Rodriguez had offered to bring Isabella to watch. "Mama!" Isabella ran across the lobby and threw her arms around Rosa. "You came! You're really going to play piano!" "I'm going to try," Rosa said, hugging her daughter tight. Her hands were still shaking. "She's been talking about this all afternoon," Mrs. Rodriguez said with a warm smile. She told the whole class that her mother was going to be in a talent show. Rosa felt a flutter of panic. What if she disappointed Isabella in front of her? Teacher? What if she had made a terrible mistake? Number 43. Rosa's heart stopped. That was her number. "That's you, Mama." Isabella squeezed Rosa's hand. "I'll be right here watching. You're going to be amazing." Rosa walked toward the auditorium doors on legs that felt like jelly. The volunteer coordinator met her at the entrance. "Just walk straight to the piano," she said kindly. "Take your time to get comfortable. When you're ready, just start playing." The auditorium doors opened, and Rosa stepped inside. The room was bigger than she had expected. About 300 people filled the seats, all looking toward the stage. The lights were bright, and Rosa could barely see the faces in the audience, but she could feel them watching her. Rosa was still wearing her work clothes, the same blue dress she had worn to sell fish that morning. She was aware that she probably still smelled faintly of the market, even though she had washed her hands 3 times in the lobby bathroom. She walked across the stage toward the grand piano in the center. Her footsteps echoed in the quiet room. She could hear people whispering, probably wondering who this woman was and what she was going to do. Rosa sat down at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly. The piano was beautiful, much nicer than the old upright at Isabella's school. She lifted her hands to the keys and then stopped. For a terrifying moment, her mind went completely blank. She couldn't remember a single song. Her fingers felt frozen above the keys. The silence stretched on and on. Someone in the audience coughed. Rosa heard a child whisper loudly, "Why isn't she playing anything?" Rosa closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about Isabella sitting somewhere in the dark audience, believing with her whole heart that her mother was special. She thought about her parents, who had worked so hard to give her this gift. She thought about all the years she had hidden who she really was. And then, like magic, the music came back to her. Rosa began with a single note. Just one clear, perfect sound that rang through the auditorium like a bell. Then another note. And another. She was playing Clair de Lune by Debussy, the same piece she had heard in the market weeks ago. But she wasn't just playing the notes. She was telling a story with the music, painting pictures in the air with sound. The melody was gentle and flowing like moonlight on water. Rosa's fingers moved across the keys with a grace that seemed impossible for hands that spent their days handling fish and counting coins. Every note was placed exactly where it needed to be, with just the right amount of feeling. The audience was completely silent now. Rosa could feel their attention like a warm blanket wrapping around her. They weren't looking at the fish vendor anymore. They were seeing the artist she had always been inside. As the music continued, Rosa felt 20 years of hiding and hurt flowing out through her fingertips. Every cruel comment, every moment of feeling invisible, every dream she had buried was being transformed into something beautiful. The piece built to its most emotional section, and Rosa played it with tears streaming down her face. But they were good tears, tears of joy and relief and recognition. She was home. After 20 years of being lost, she had found her way back to herself. When the final notes faded away, the auditorium was silent for what felt like forever. Rosa sat at the piano breathing hard, wondering if she had imagined the whole thing. Then someone started clapping. Just one person at first, then 2, then 10. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding louder than Rosa had ever heard. The sound washed over her like ocean waves. Rosa stood up from the piano bench and looked out at the audience for the first time. She could see Isabella in the 3rd row, jumping up and down and clapping with tears of happiness on her face. Mrs. Rodriguez was applauding with a huge smile. Miguel from the market was there, looking amazed. Even some of the teenagers who had made fun of Rosa were in the audience, clapping and shaking their heads in disbelief. The applause went on for 3 full minutes. People were shouting bravo and whistling. Some were wiping away tears. Rosa had never felt anything like this before, not even during her competition wins as a teenager. When the applause finally died down, Rosa walked to the front of the stage. She wasn't sure what to say. She had never expected this moment to happen. "Thank you," she said into the microphone that someone had handed her. Her voice was shaky but clear. "I haven't played piano in 20 years. I forgot how much I missed it." Someone in the audience shouted, "Where did you learn to play like that?" Rosa smiled. "I studied at the Regional Music Academy when I was young, but life happened, and I had to stop playing to take care of my family." "Why did you start again?" another voice called out. Rosa looked at Isabella, who was beaming at her from the audience. "Because my daughter reminded me that it's never too late to remember who you really are." The audience erupted in applause again. Rosa waved and walked off the stage, her heart pounding with joy and relief. In the lobby afterward, Rosa was surrounded by people congratulating her. The teenagers who used to make fun of her at the market came up to apologize and tell her how incredible she was. Parents asked if she would consider giving piano lessons to their children. A man who owned a restaurant downtown asked if she would be interested in playing dinner music on weekends. But the best moment came when Isabella ran up and hugged her as tight as she could. "Mama, you were right," Isabella whispered. "You do have magic in your fingers." "We both do," Rosa whispered back. "I'm going to teach you everything I know." That night, Rosa and Isabella walked home together under the streetlights. Rosa felt different, like she was walking taller than she had in years. Tomorrow she would go back to selling fish at the market. But she would never be just the fish vendor again. People would still smell the ocean on her clothes, but now they would also see the music in her soul. She had stopped hiding, and the world was more beautiful because of it. Rosa had remembered the most important lesson of all. You are never just one thing. You can be a fish vendor and a pianist. You can be practical and magical. You can take care of your family and still chase your dreams. Sometimes all it takes is one person who believes in you enough to help you believe in yourself again.